Good morning, students. Yesterday we have started the sensory organs or the sense organs, the new chapter, and we have completed the skin. The first one is the skin. So, the sensory organs are of 5 type, Panchendriyagalu, I have already told yesterday, and the senses are touch, sight, hearing, smell, and the taste. These 5 are the basic senses. Basic senses of humans are touch, sight, hearing, smell, and taste. And for each, there is a specialized organ, sense organ. They are eyes for the sight purpose, ears for hearing, nose for smell, tongue for taste, and skin for the touch. Sparsha, touch. So, these are the 5 sense organs in which yesterday we have studied the skin. The skin we have studied yesterday, and the functions of the skin today we have to start. The functions of the skin. This completes the skin. The skin provides mechanical protection for underlying tissues. The skin provides mechanical protection. It gives the protection for underlying or the below tissues. Next one, it acts as a physical barrier against the entry of microorganisms and the chemicals. It acts as a barrier, physical barrier. It prevents the entry of microorganisms and the chemicals through the skin. It prevents loss of water, that is dehydration. It prevents or it protects the loss of water. The dehydration is protected or it is objected or stopped by the skin, and thus it prevents the loss of water. Next one, the basal cells of epidermis contain brown pigment called melanin, which protects from harmful effects of ultraviolet rays and light. The melanin pigment present in the skin at the lower layer of the epidermis, basal layer of the epidermis, protects the harmful effects of ultraviolet rays of the sun. Next one, it plays a role of important sensory organ. The skin plays a very important role of a sensory organ. Next one, it has an important role in temperature regulation by controlling blood flow, by production of sweat, it controls or it regulates the temperature of the body by controlling the blood flow. The blood flow is controlled, and the production of sweat also help in the regulation of the body temperature. Hence, it is a very important organ, sense organ, which controls or regulates the blood flow and the sweat production. Next one, it plays an important role in production of vitamin D. Vitamin D is produced by the skin, and this is a very important role of the skin. The skin produces vitamin D. Vitamin D. It is the storehouse of water and fat. Skin is nothing but it is a storehouse of water and fat. Fat is deposited below the skin, and it is storehouse, and the water is also the storehouse of the skin. It helps in the production of metabolic activities. It helps in the heat production by metabolic activity. It produces the heat. The skin produces the heat by the metabolic activities. Next one, it helps in heat loss, which can be regulated. It also helps in heat loss. In heat production and heat loss, it helps. The skin helps. Coming to the 11th one, function of the skin. It has an absorption property of some drug molecules. Some of the drug molecules are absorbed by the skin, and it is a special property of the skin. Next one, the 12th one, it is a minor excretory organ for sodium in sweat, urea, when kidney function is impaired, aromatic substances like garlic and other spices also. So it is an excretory organ. It is a small minor excretory organ which excretes the sodium in the sweat and urea also, and the aromatic substances like garlic and other spices are also excreted out by the skin. So this is a very important function of the skin. So there are about 12 functions I have given. So please go through the notes wherein the functions are there. So they will ask the functions of the skin. What are the functions of the skin? So you have to write about 12 functions I have given already. So this ends the skin. That is the first one, the skin, the sense organ for touch. Then coming to the second one, that is the eye. Eye, the figure of eye I have given in the notes very clearly. So you can see this here, the clear picture of an eye. Eye is surrounded by 3 layers, and the front portion is having the lens, and the innermost layer of the eye contains the cornea, which absorbs the light rays. Then it will be sent by the optic nerves. So these are the optic nerves, and this is the corneal level, and there are 3 layers here. This is the lens, and this portion is the front portion of the eye, eyeball. This is called as the eyeball, and there is one more portion here, posterior portion. Posterior and anterior chambers are there in the eye. So you can see clearly the figure, and it is very clear in the notes. You can go through the notes. Now coming to the eye. The eye is the organ of sight. It is the sense organ of sight. The sight is recognized by the eye, and it will the messages will be sent to the brain. So the sight sense is recognized by the sense organ eye, eye. It is situated in a bony socket of skull called orbital cavity. This is the orbital cavity. So this portion is the orbital cavity in which the eye is situated inside. The orbital cavity, 2 orbital cavities are there, here one and here one. So in that cavities, orbital cavities, these eyes are situated, eyes are placed. So they are situated in the bony socket of skull called orbital cavity. Orbital cavity is spherical in shape and contain the muscles of eyeballs, nerves, eyeballs, nerves, blood vessels, lacrimal glands. So the orbital cavity is spherical in shape and contain the muscles of eyeballs. There are the muscles of the eyeballs which hold the eyeball. Then nerves are very important. Orbital nerves are there. blood vessels, the blood vessel which supply the blood and which supplies the nutrient and the oxygen for the cells of the eye or the tissue of the eye. Then lacrimal glands, that are tear glands. The tear, kanneeru barudu lacrimal glands ninda. So lacrimal glands are also present in the eye. The space between eye and the orbital cavity is occupied by adipose fat tissue. The space between eye and orbital cavity is occupied by the adipose tissue. There is an adipose tissue present in between the eye and the orbital cavity, which protects the eye from injuries. It protects the eye from injuries. Next point, structurally, the two eyes are separate, but they function together as a pair. They function as a pair together. Structurally, they are separate. Two are present in the human beings. Next one, the essential organs of the visual apparatus are eyeballs, optic nerves, visual centers of the brain. The very essential organs of a visual apparatus are eyeballs, visual apparatus, eyeballs, optic nerves which carry the stimuluses, then visual centers of the brain which recognize the messages coming from the eye. So there are three important essential organs of visual apparatus. Coming to the next one, the protracting and smooth functioning organs of eye are the protracting and smooth functioning organs of the eye are eyebrows, eyelids, conjunctiva, lacrimal glands, muscles of eyes. So 5 organs are there. They are eyebrows, eyelids, conjunctivas, lacrimal glands, then muscles of the eye. These are all protecting organs of the eye. And the visual apparatuses are eyeball, optic nerves, and visual centers of the brain. So there are 2 parts here. Coming to the eyeball, the first one, that is the essential visual apparatus. Visual apparatus is the eyeball. It is situated in the center part of the orbital cavity and is spherical in shape. Each one is like camera with lens which produces images of objects that we look at, and images fall on retina. The cells of retina convert light images into nerves impulses which pass through optic nerves to reach cerebral cortex of the brain. The eyeball is situated in the anterior part of the orbital cavity. At the anterior part of the orbital cavity, the eyeballs are situated and they are spherical in shape. Each one is like a camera. They are like a camera with lenses. The lenses are there in the camera, which produce images of objects that we look at, and images fall on retina. The images fall on the retina. The cells of the retina convert light images into nerve impulses which pass through optic nerves to reach cerebral cortex of the brain. Next point, internally the eye is divided into 2 chambers, anterior and the posterior chamber. The eye is divided into 2 parts, that is the anterior chamber and the posterior chamber. The suspensory ligament and ciliary body with lens of the eye separate the 2 chambers. The suspensory ligament and the ciliary body with the lens, the lens of the eye, they separate the 2 chambers. The anterior chamber and the posterior chamber are separated by the ciliary bodies and the lens. The anterior chamber is filled with a clear watery fluid called aqueous humor. The aqueous humor is nothing but a clear watery fluid which is present in the anterior chamber. In the anterior chamber there is a fluid called as aqueous humor. Now coming to the posterior, the posterior chamber is filled with jelly-like substance called vitreous humor. Vitreous humor is a gel-like substance, which is filled in the posterior chamber of the eye. There are three layers of tissues in the wall of eye. The first one is the outer fibrous layer of sclera and cornea. So there are two. The outer layer is made up of is called sclera and cornea. Fibrous layer of sclera and cornea, the outer layer. The middle layer, the vascular layer of the choroid. The choroid is the middle layer which is vascular in nature. Suspension ligament and ciliary body and iris are present in the middle layer. Now coming to the inner layer is a nervous tissue layer called as retina. The inner layer is called retina. The scalary, which is very hard in nature, it forms the outermost layer of the eyeball. It consists of strong, opaque fibrous membrane that maintains the shape of the eyeball and gives attachment to intrinsic muscles of the eye. It consists of strong, opaque fibrous membrane that protects and maintains the shape of the eye. When viewed from front, it is referred as white of the eye. White of the eye. In this portion, it is covered by transparent mucous membrane called conjunctiva. When viewed from the front side, it is referred as white of the eye, and this portion it is covered by transparent mucous membrane called conjunctiva. Conjunctiva is present here. Now coming to the next point, posteriorly the optic nerve passes through it from retina. Posteriorly the optic nerve passes through this place from retina. It provides insertion to recti and oblique muscles, optic nerves, ciliary nerves and vessels and choroid veins. It provides insertion to recti and oblique muscles, optic nerves, ciliary nerves and vessels and choroid veins. All these structures are present or inserted in the scalaries. Now coming to the cornea. Anteriorly the scalaries continues as a clear transparent epithelial membrane called as cornea. Cornea is nothing but is the anterior scalaries continues as a clear transparent epithelial membrane called as cornea. Cornea is described as window of the eye. Cornea is called as the window of the eye, which is more convex and light rays pass through it to reach retina. The light rays pass through the cornea and reach the retina. Next point, it is involved in refracting light rays to focus on retina. It involved in refracting light rays. It refracts the light rays and focuses on retina. It is separated by iris by a space called anterior chamber. It is separated by iris and a space called anterior chamber. It is innervated by branches of ophthalmic nerves and sensitive to pain. So it is innervated by branches of ophthalmic nerves. Ophthalmic means eye. Ophthalmic nerves, eye nerves, and it is very sensitive to pain. Cornea has no blood vessel and lymphatic ducts. No blood vessels. Blood vessels and lymphatic ducts are completely absent in the cornea, and an ideal tissue for transplantation. And it is a very ideal tissue for the transplantation because there are no blood vessels and lymphatic ducts. So while transplantation, blood flow is not there because blood vessels are absent in the cornea. So the cornea can be replaced or transplanted. It derives nutrients from aqueous humor of anterior chamber. It gets nutrients from the aqueous humor fluid, present in the anterior chamber, and from which the nutrient is absorbed by the cornea. Coming to the third layer, choroid, choroid, choroid. It is the middle layer of the eye containing many blood vessels derived from ophthalmic branch of the internal carotid artery and is deep chocolate brown in color. It is middle layer of the eye, third layer of the eye containing many blood vessels derived from or blood vessels from ophthalmic branches of internal carotid artery and deep chocolate brown in color. The light enters through pupil and stimulates the sensory receptors of the retina, which is then absorbed by choroid. The light enters through pupil and stimulates the sensory receptors. Coming to the fourth one, that is the ciliary body and suspensory ligaments. Ciliary body and the suspensory ligaments. The middle layer, ciliary body and the suspensory ligament. It is a circular structure, contains continuation of posterior part of the choroid with the ciliary muscles, that is circular and smooth muscle fibers and secretory epithelial cells. It is circular structure, continuation of anterior part of the choroid with the ciliary muscles and secretory epithelial cells. Next point, the lens is attached to ciliary body by suspension ligaments. The lens is attached to the ciliary body by the suspensory ligaments. The contraction and relaxation of the ciliary muscles, which are attached to the ligament, control the size and the thickness of the lens. The thickness and the size of the lens is controlled by the contraction and relaxation movement of the ciliary muscles, which are attached to the ligament. Coming to the iris, fifth one is the iris. Iris it is pigmented colored ring-like membrane surrounding the pupil of eye. The pupil of eye is surrounded by the iris and is pigmented colored ring-like membrane. It extends anteriorly from ciliary body lying behind cornea and in front of the lens. It divides the anterior chamber into anterior and the posterior cavities. There are two cavities and two cavities in the anterior chamber, that is anterior and the posterior cavities, which contain the fluid aqueous humor. Aqueous humor is present in the first one, that is the posterior cavity, which contains the fluid. The aqueous fluid is present in the anterior chamber. It is composed of pigment cells and two layers of smooth muscles of fibers with a dark central opening pupil immediately in front of lens. It is supplied by parasympathetic and sympathetic nerves. It is supplied by parasympathetic and sympathetic nerves. The parasympathetic nerve stimulates the constriction of pupil, and sympathetic nerve stimulates dilation. The parasympathetic nerve stimulates constriction and the sympathetic nerve stimulates dilation. The color of iris is genetically determined and depends on the pigment cell membranes present. The color of this iris is generally determined and depended on the pigment cell numbers present. Now coming to the retina. The sixth one is the retina. Retina, the nervous tissue. It is the innermost nervous tissue layer of the eye, which is thin, delicate, and continuous posteriorly with optic nerve. It is very thin and delicate, continuous with posteriorly with the optic nerve. Optic nerve is there. Next point, opposite the entrance of optic nerve, there is a circular area called optic disc without rods and cones nerve cells. Opposite to the entrance of the optic nerve, there is a circular area called optic disc in which the rods and cones nerve cells are completely absent, and so it is called blind spot. That place is called blind spot. Optic disc is called blind spot. About 3 millimeter below optic disc, there is a depression called macula lutea. Macula lutea, which is yellow in color. The center of depression is called fovea centralis. Fovea centralis, with cones only. Cone type of nerve cells are present here in the fovea centralis, the depression place. Retina has three parts: optic, containing nerve tissue; ciliary, non-nervous tissue covering ciliary body; then iridial, non-nervous tissue connecting iridials. So three parts are there in the retina. Retina has 10 layers, which include the pigmented layer of epithelium, layer of rod and cone nerve cells, bipolar neurons, ganglions, cell layer, and nerve fiber layers. So all these parts are there in the retina with the 10 layers. There are 10 layers in the retina. The fibers of optic nerve begin from the ganglion layer of the retina and pass through optic disc, then through the orbit to the optic chiasma and to the brain. So the fibers of optic nerve begin from the ganglion layer of the retina and pass through optic disc, then through the orbit to the optic chiasma, comes to the optic chiasma, and lastly to the brain. The rods and the cone nerve cells are the actual receptors of light and sight, which contain photosensitive pigments. Rods contain rhodopsin and cones contain iodopsin pigments. The rods nerve cell contain rhodopsin and the cone nerve cell contains iodopsin pigments. There are two pigments. Retina is supplied by branch of the optic artery. Retina is supplied by the branch of the optic artery. The aqueous humor fluid. It is a clear watery fluid filled in the space between the cornea and lens, that is anterior chamber of the eye. The aqueous humor is secreted by the capillaries of the ciliary body. The capillaries of the ciliary body secrete this aqueous humor secretion. The decrease in the secretion of this fluid results in increase in intraocular pressure, that is glaucoma, and leads into degradation of retina and blindness. The blindness is caused by the under secretion of the aqueous humor fluid. The fluid helps to maintain intraocular pressure, thus maintains the shape of the eyeball. It also maintains the shape of the eyeball. It is rich in ascorbic acid, glucose and amino acids, and nourishes the cornea and lens. The fluid aqueous humor is made up of ascorbic acid, glucose, amino acids, which nourishes the cornea and the lens. The vitreous humor, which is present in the posterior chamber. It is colorless, transparent, jelly-like fluid which fills the posterior chamber of the eye. The posterior chamber of the eye is filled with the vitreous humor. It is a colorless, transparent, gel-like fluid. It is a gel-like fluid, not clear watery fluid just like aqueous humor. This is gel-like fluid which fills the posterior chamber of the eye. It is enclosed a delicate homogeneous hyaloid membrane. It is enclosed in hyaloid membrane, homogeneous hyaloid membrane. This fluid maintains the shape of the eyeball and supports the retina. The retina is supported by this vitreous humor fluid which is present in the posterior chamber. So this is all about the eye. Today we have completed the second one, that is the eye. Tomorrow we will take up the ear. So the structure of the ear and other things you can see in the figure. You can see in the notes also. So please go through the notes. So today we will stop at this level. Tomorrow we will take up the ear, kiwi, ear, the structure of the ear. Thank you.